Since the death of God, there's been a vacancy open. You could fill that void. Here's how. Structure your cult like an onion with the most benign and helpful features on the outside and the most controlling, kooky, and evil parts at the secret inner core. Use deception. Don't tell them who you really are. Lie. Leave out important information or distort information.
Are you trying to recruit me?
No. I'm just trying to share something meaningful with you.
Establish front groups.
We're a meditation center.
We're a world peace organization.
We're a personal development center.
Promise to fulfill their dreams.
Don't you want a world of unconditional love and brotherhood? We have the secrets to self-improvement. You can join us and be special. Join our elite mission to save the world.
You can tell them time is running out and that they must make their decision now or it will be too late.
This is an issue of burning urgency.
Don't give them time to think.
Hey guys, this is Amelia. I know that some of you prefer short clips, so I'm breaking my episode, Deprogramming the Left Inside the Mind of a Modern Cult, into 3 parts. This is part 2 of 3. If at any point you decide you want to watch the full episode, you can find the link in the description box below. Before we talk about whether the left has devolved into a cult or not, let's step back and ask a simple question. What's the difference between a cult and a religion? This is going to be a really important distinction as we continue this conversation even into future episodes. You hear the word cult thrown around all of the time, usually as an insult. But let's look at how 2 people from completely different worldviews, an atheist and a Christian, actually define it. Let's start with Hemant Mehta. He's an atheist commentator and the creator of The Atheist Voice.
You know, there's a saying that religion is an old cult, and a cult is a new religion. But that's not exactly accurate. So really, what's the difference? Is it just about popularity? I mean, unpopular, newer religions are cults? There's not necessarily a set difference, but here's what you should look out for. A cult doesn't let you leave. A good religion, if we can call it that, lets you come and go without a problem. Sure, they want you to stay, but they're not going to come after you if you stop believing. A cult only lets you associate with other cult members. Do you have friends who aren't atheists or Christians or whatever you are? Good. A cult doesn't let that happen. And if you leave the faith, they are done with you. A cult may require you to live with other cult members, like in a single home or a commune. I mean, with religions, you live on your own and you come together every so often to worship. Cults have singular leaders with all the power. I mean, he has special access to the truth and no one else does. That's different from megachurch pastors who might love the spotlight, but even they won't say the road to salvation goes through them. Cults don't let you disagree. If you challenge the teachings or disagree with the theology, you should be able to have a discussion and debate about it. Most churches are okay with that. I mean, there are Christian apologists who run around trying to defend the faith from its critics, which is good because it means they're comfortable having that conversation. Questioning your beliefs is a good thing. I mean, if your religion can't handle your questions, then you should leave it.
So notice what he describes here. Isolation, control, silencing dissent, shunning or punishing those who leave. If this same behavior showed up in intimate partner relationships, we'd call it abuse. It might seem obvious from the outside, but inside these relationships, it can be really hard to distinguish control from love. Similarly, inside the cults, this same behavior can be misconstrued as devotion. Now let's hear from Brett Kunkle. He's a Christian apologist and approaches this issue from the other side.
So what's the difference between a religion and a cult, and how can you tell the difference? Well, let's first define religion. A religion would be some kind of organized system of belief and practice that really tries to answer life's most fundamental and significant questions. What is real? Does God exist? What is the purpose of life? How should I live my life? Is there a particular God, and how am I supposed to be devoted to him or follow him or it or her or whatever you think it is? And so that's what religion would be. And of course, it's hard to get a definition of religion that includes every single aspect, but we know that this would include the beliefs It would include the rituals or the behaviors, the practices. It might include the traditions, the various holidays or feasts, or all of those different aspects. But there's some kind of organization to them, and that the organization is centered around certain beliefs that we have about the ultimate, about ultimate reality. But we can use the term cult in two distinct ways. First, there's what you might call a theological cult. The cultish behavior has to do with the theology or the beliefs. And so the cult will adopt the beliefs of that larger religion, but will then change them in very fundamental ways. Now, you also have the term cult used in a sociological sense, right? When we talk about sociology, we're talking about the study of society and cultural influences and that kind of thing. And so you have a sociological definition of cult, where a cult might include, some kind of authoritarian leader, and there is blind allegiance to that leader, and that leader gets to dictate kind of all of the rules and boundaries for that group. And it's not merely a sacred text like the Bible that, has divine origins, but this person speaks on behalf of God themselves, and they have authoritarian rule. And followers, then, the adherents, are supposed to follow strictly everything that this person says. And if not, then there's certain punishments that are in play for some control of the group.
From a completely different worldview, he ends up describing almost the same thing. Now, I know this can all seem so obvious. People should be able to discern the difference between a culty environment and a healthy one, right? If it was so obvious, how do we keep falling victim to it? And is there any way for us to distinguish whether we've fallen into a cult or not? The comments in the last episode were insane. More than 7,000 people joined the conversation, and I hope that you'll continue to do so in this episode. I'm sure people will have a lot of things to say about whether the left is in a cult or not, whether that's an appropriate use of the word cult. So all of that being said, someone who commented on the last video said that I should check out the work of Stephen Hassan. Stephen is one of the leading experts on cult psychology, and I think his B.I.T.E model gives us a clear way to recognize high control systems. This is him explaining what it is and how it works. Take a listen.
So one of the things that helped me get out of the moon cult back in 1976 was the work of Robert J. Lifton, who was a military intelligence psychiatrist in the 50s studying Chinese communist brainwashing techniques. And he wrote a landmark book called The Thought Reform and the Psychology of Totalism. And in this book, he outlined 8 criteria that any environment may be judged as a brainwashing or a thought reform environment. And that book was critical, and that model was critical to helping me understand what had happened to me. And based on his model, I developed the B.I.T.E model of mind control. The B stands for behavior control, then there's information control, thought control, and emotional control. And essentially, the B.I.T.E model offers my cutting-edge approach for how anyone can evaluate whether or not they've been a victim of mind control. And in the new book, Freedom of Mind, I'm shifting away from the term mind control because it elicits the idea of somehow somebody with chips in your brain or some type of puppeteer holding it, which in some ways is the case psychologically. But we're moving towards the term undue influence, which is a legal term, which talks about how a discrepancy of power is used to undermine a person's ability to think for themselves and make good decisions for themselves. And so models have been developed now. My friend Alan Shefflin, law professor at Santa Clara University, for example, has developed a model where you take into account the predisposing vulnerabilities of a person, as well as the sophisticated techniques of influence that an individual or group are using to combine to basically create what we refer to in the mental health field as a dissociative disorder, where a person is split from themselves and a new cult identity is created to suppress their real identity. And so the question that people ask me often is, well, how do you know if you're under undue influence or mind control or that you've been brainwashed? And what I say is you wouldn't. That's part of the dilemma, because your operating system, your mind, has been co-opted, if you have been.
It's an excellent framework and one we'll use moving forward to distinguish cult environments from healthy ones. But before we do, I have to acknowledge that I completely disagree with the way that he applied the model to politics in his book, The Cult of Trump. In 2019, when the book was first published, Hassan interpreted Trump's popularity as evidence of undue influence and cultic manipulation. And fine, in 2019, many of us were actively organizing protests against Trump and thinking the same thing. But since that time, a lot has happened, and many of us have adjusted our view based off of the new information that has come forward. So during research for this video, I wondered if Hassan had maybe shifted his stance. And the answer is no, absolutely not. He did not change his mind on this. In fact, in a recent interview with Jane Borden, author of Cults Like Us, Hassan doubled down. Together, they argued that MAGA is a kind of apocalyptic doomsday cult, that Trump is essentially a cult leader, and that America's, quote, cult DNA goes way back to the Puritans. In their telling, the people who voted for Trump are a bunch of deluded followers clinging to failed prophecies. Here, take a listen for yourself.
I became very preoccupied with the division in this country that was laid bare by the 2016 election. And I was wondering, how can people who are really basically the same be so ideologically opposed? And I started seeing this cult-like thinking I'd been researching showing up everywhere in American culture and pop culture and politics. And I just started pulling the thread and traced it all the way back to the Puritans. One day it just kind of dawned on me like, oh, the Puritans look a lot like a cult. I think people today would call them a cult. I call them a high control doomsday group. And of course, you know, the definitions can get specific.
Right.
But yeah, I think their doomsday ideology did not go away. It just became the foundation of American culture.
To add that we need to be careful not to have the doomsday thinking for those of us who oppose the cult of Trump and the march to fascism.
That's right. And they're being victimized. What we want is for a lot of these people to kind of say, oh gosh, I fell for a con. I made a mistake. You know, I also think it's important to acknowledge that not everyone in MAGA has fallen prey to cult-like thinking. But I think a fair amount of people are being taken advantage of.
So who do you think isn't in the cult of Trump anymore in MAGA?
Well, I do think a lot of people are leaving. In fact, it looks a lot like what happens following a failure of prophecy.
Mm-hmm.
This clip was so frustrating to me because this is what happens when conviction detaches from reality and when people surrender discernment for the party line. So first of all, by bringing in the Puritans in this flippant way, they're repeating the same pattern we talked about earlier, where left-leaning historians, commentators, or sociologists reduce complex history to fit their worldview. In doing this, they reshape the past to conform to present beliefs. That's dangerous because it blinds us to how easily any of us can fall into the same traps as the Puritans in Salem. And the problem with doing this is that the evidence shows the complete opposite of everything they just described in this clip. The failed doomsday prophecies came from the left. Claims that Trump would end democracy, that fascism was taking over, that America wouldn't survive his presidency. None of that materialized. So let's take a look at the hard evidence, not this conjecture, and stack it up against Hassan's own B.I.T.E model. I suspect that if Hassan actually applied his framework honestly, he'd see it maps almost perfectly onto the left's cultural dominance. Okay, so first step in the B.I.T.E model is behavior control.
Isolate them from the rest of the world. Make them feel part of a special elite group with an important mission.
Monuments and historical landmarks will someday be erected to commemorate us and our sacrifices.
Tighten your group's bond by establishing scapegoats and enemies. Demonize outsiders as less than human, biased, corrupt, or conspiring against the group. Develop an us versus them mentality.
When you know someone voted that way, do you recommend, just from a psychological standpoint, being around them? we got the holidays coming up.
Absolutely not. So if you are going into a situation where you have family members, where you have close friends who you know have voted in ways that are against you, like what you said, against your livelihood, and it's completely fine to not be around those people and to tell them why.
Here's how it applies. If you voted for Trump, were labeled MAGA, or held dissenting views on issues the left suddenly deemed untouchable, you were smeared as irredeemable, insane, or morally corrupt. Speech was heavily policed, even when it contradicted basic reality. Under cancel culture, something as small as using biologically accurate pronouns could cost you your job, friends, family, or your future. And of course, there's been the weaponization of prosecutions under lawfare, targeting Trump and his affiliates. And this is not a comprehensive list of all of the ways that behavior was controlled. If you can think of others, please drop it in the comments. But this is just to get us started.
Start slowly. A good con man takes a little bit of truth and a lot of lies and pulls the wool over the eyes of the ignorant.
Block out any information which is critical of the group.
Encourage members to spy and report on one another.
A week later, the first of what became known as the Twitter Files reports came out. The original promise of the internet was that it might democratize the exchange of information globally. A free internet would overwhelm all attempts to control information flow, its very existence a threat to anti-democratic forms of government everywhere. What we found in the files was a sweeping effort to reverse that promise and use machine learning and other tools to turn the internet into an instrument of censorship and social control. Unfortunately, our own government appears to be playing a lead role. We learned Twitter, Facebook, Google, and other companies developed a formal system for taking in moderation requests from every corner of government, from the FBI, the DHS, the HHS, DOD, the Global Engagement Center at State, even the CIA. For every government agency scanning Twitter, there were perhaps 20 quasi-private entities doing the same thing, including Stanford's Election Integrity Partnership, NewsGuard, the Global Disinformation Index, and many others, many taxpayer-funded. A focus of this fast-growing network, as Mike noted, is making lists of people whose opinions, beliefs, associations, or sympathies are deemed misinformation, disinformation, or malinformation. That last term is just a euphemism for true but inconvenient. Undeniably, the making of such lists is a form of digital McCarthyism. Ordinary Americans are not just being reported to Twitter for de-amplification or deplatforming, but to firms like PayPal, digital advertisers like Xandr, and crowdfunding sites like GoFundMe. These companies can and do refuse service to law-abiding people and businesses whose only crime is falling afoul of a distant, faceless, unaccountable, algorithmic judge. As someone who grew up a traditional ACLU liberal, this mechanism for punishment and deprivation without due process is horrifying. Another troubling aspect is the role of the press, which should be the people's last line of defense in such cases. But instead of investigating these groups, journalists partnered with them. If Twitter declined to remove an account right away, government agencies and NGOs would call reporters for the New York Times, Washington Post, and other outlets, who in turn would call Twitter demanding to know why action had not yet been taken. Effectively, news media became an arm of a state-sponsored thought policing system.
Next is information control. For years, intentional smears against Trump were elevated while dissenting stories were suppressed. Censorship became institutionalized, with social platforms pressured by government actors to protect one political side. We've since seen the collapse of Russia collusion narratives, revelations of FBI and DOJ overreach to hinder Trump's campaign, and the coordinated suppression of stories like the Hunter Biden laptop story or questions about President Biden's cognition. None of this was accidental or coincidental. We now know from well-documented evidence that this was orchestrated and paid for by the Democrat Party and its affiliates. I talk about this a lot more in the episode called The 10-Year Smear. That's going to be linked below if you want a deep dive. So next up is thought control.
Control their thoughts.
Our ideology answers all questions to all problems.
Let our doctrine think for you.
Induce trance states and self-hypnosis by practicing thought-stopping rituals and repetitive acts like chanting.
Stamp out down, 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 stamp out down.
Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here.
A few moments later.
We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love not stop tomorrow. You are loved. You matter. You belong here.
Other than all of the brainwashing that was happening through propaganda in the media and social media, we also had this issue of simplified mantras replacing debate. Slogans like abolish the police and trans women are women are just two examples, but there are dozens and dozens of these. These simplistic ideological positions became moral absolutes overnight. Even though they all have the capacity to be deeply damaging to society, questioning them or merely disagreeing was treated as evidence of guilt and moral depravity. Next up, we have emotional control. This is a big one.
Separate the recruit from himself by attacking the self and inducing a mental breakdown disguised as a spiritual awakening. When they start to freak out, have side effects, or hallucinate, tell them they are flushing out the bad stuff inside.
When I was meditating, I felt an infinite emptiness. It was utterly terrifying.
No, this is good. You're transforming. Do it more.
Control their emotions. Induce guilt.
The United States dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima.
People are dying of starvation.
People are dying of starvation.
You are not living up to your potential.
I heard what you were saying.
You're doing it again.
You're
doing it again.
I don't care.
You're doing it again.
It's wrong.
You're doing it again.
Persecuted her for standing out.
You're doing it again.
Persecuted him for standing out. The only change that ever happens is when people stand out, and I haven't sat back too long.
Martin Luther King Jr. was shot. Are you in any physical danger here? Are you in any physical danger here? Is that girl in any physical danger here? Emmett Till was hanged by his neck after he was beaten almost to death. I have made the point, and we could stop there, but you have to nail it down. And so it goes on longer than some people think it should, but you have to nail it down.
The constant fear-mongering about the end of democracy, the reflexive branding of anyone who dissented as fascist, Nazi, evil, etc., the ritualized guilt over privileged or invisible racism or invisible transphobia, etc. And let's not forget the steady stream of victim narratives used to stoke outrage, division, and even justify political violence.
Fighting resistance. Tell them their critical thoughts are evidence that they have committed crimes against the group. Start investigating them and make up crimes.
I think I want to leave.
You must be insane.
Make them feel guilty.
We're doing important work here.
You expect saving the world is easy?
We're all called upon to make some sacrifices for the cause.
Just when things get tough, you want to give up.
You're weak.
There must be something wrong with you.
There must be something wrong with you.
There must be something wrong with me. There must be something wrong with me.
Yes, there is.
Yes, there is.
When I was on the left, I had all my friends on the right, and they always talked to me. They always had conversations with me, and that's all it was, and we were still friends. When I made my way over to the center right, all my friends on the left kicked me to the curb, called me all the names, called me all the slurs, called me self-hating black, self-hating gay, wrote me off, kicked me out of friend groups. When I think about all the death threats that I've ever gotten, when I think about all the comments that I've been hurled and things people have said about me, it's insane. It's insane. And it's all from the left. It always is. Yeah, there's some people leaving the right, but that's why you see this mass exodus of people leaving the left. Look at this.
Just be a lesson to all those other conservative freaks, those little weirdos with podcasts. Just know your necks are on the line. Your necks. No. Your necks.
People are making lists. People are talking about other people are next. Anyone that's more conservative and outspoken needs to be shut down. You need to be put on a list, need to be taken out. Have you really lost the plot? You're so far gone where you think it is justified to eliminate someone for thinking differently than you.
Contrary to Hassan and Borden's conclusions, millions of Americans have walked away from the Democrat Party. Since 2020, Democrats have lost about 2.1 million registered voters in states that track party affiliation, while Republicans have gained roughly 2.4 million voters. If anyone's watching prophecies collapse and followers scatter, it wouldn't be Trump's base. I don't think the signs could be any clearer than this. I mean, if there was a B.I.T.E scorecard, the left would be batting 1,000. And remember, Hassan himself admits that the model comes straight from Robert J. Lifton's Thought Reform and the Psychology of Totalism, a study of Maoist brainwashing in communist China. That's not MAGA. That sounds like the left's playbook. And either way, there's no hard feelings on my side of things. This is just a reminder that it's possible to value someone's work without agreeing with them on everything. Just because I feel Hassan gets it wrong here doesn't mean his broader insights into cult psychology aren't helpful. To me, it just shows how sticky this stuff is, how easy it is for anyone to let mass manipulation obscure reality and blind them to truth. It happens to all of us. As Hassan himself says, it's possible and even likely to be in a cult without even realizing it. And I hope that he's open to his own advice on how to prevent exactly this.
And so for me, the answer really is you need to take a time out from the environment that you're in and the people who are influencing you. You need to study models of mind control and undue influence. You need to deliberately seek out critical information about the leader, the doctrine, and the group. You want to find out for yourself and trust that you have the ability to know and to fact check whether or not things are true or not.
Critical components in mind control. Being made over to be clones of the person who's at the top of the pyramid.
Interested in this subject because of my own cult involvement. I was recruited in 1974 into a front group of the Moonies.
Hard just to prove that you're crazy. Don't question the crowd of the man who knows everything. Try to forget that you saw what you saw when you saw it. Distance yourself from the man who knows everything.
It's my policy never to read my reviews.